I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. 3 months ago, everything seemed perfect. I had a great job, a beautiful apartment in Chicago, and a wife I was proud of. Mary and I had been married for 3 years, and on the outside, everything looked like it was falling into place. We were happy, at least I thought we were. We were living the life people wanted, successful, content, with no reason to doubt anything. But that's the thing with perfect lives, they're fragile. And over time, little things started to change. Small things, almost imperceptible at first, that I told myself weren't a big deal. I tried to dismiss them, tell myself I was just being paranoid. But it didn't take long before I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. It started with the late nights. At first, it was only once or twice. Mary would come home later than usual, looking tired but offering a quick, "Sorry, babe, I stayed late at work." Or, "I had to meet a client." I figured that made sense. Her career was getting busier, and we'd both been working long hours. She'd been with the company for a while, and I didn't mind her putting in extra time. We both had dreams, after all, and sometimes sacrifices had to be made. But then it wasn't just a once-in-a-while thing. It became routine. And not just late nights. I noticed how she started rushing out of the house in the mornings, almost like she couldn't wait to leave. She'd barely say goodbye, and when she did, it was distracted. Sometimes I wouldn't even see her in the mornings. She'd already be out the door by the time I woke up. She'd say she was heading to the office early, or she had an errand to run. But the more it happened, the more I wondered what exactly was going on during those hours. I tried to give her space. We were both working hard, and I didn't want to add pressure. But I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Then the phone calls started. At first, it wasn't anything alarming. Everyone gets calls, right? And Mary always said it was just work stuff or some quick chat with an old friend. I didn't think much of it. But I started to notice something strange. Every time she took a call, especially when I was nearby, she'd go quiet, almost too quickly. If I came into the room while she was talking, she'd hang up abruptly or tell me she had to go, even if it was a really short conversation. It was subtle, but I could see it. Every time she'd get off the phone, her tone would change, just a little. It wasn't the same Mary. It was like she'd become distant for a moment. When I asked her about it, she'd smile and shrug it off. "It's just work, babe. Nothing to worry about." Or, "It's nothing serious. Just a quick catch-up with an old friend." But the thing is, she wasn't always so secretive about her phone before. We used to be open about everything. She'd leave her phone out all the time, or I'd see her on it without thinking twice. It made me feel like something was off. Maybe I was just overthinking it. I didn't want to be the type of guy who suspected his wife without cause, but the odd behavior kept piling up. Then came the changes in her appearance. Mary's always been a naturally beautiful woman, effortlessly so. She didn't need much to look amazing, but lately, it seemed like she was putting a lot more time and energy into her looks. She started dressing more carefully, spending extra time in front of the mirror in the mornings. Sometimes, she'd even change outfits a few times before leaving. I thought it was a bit odd, but I didn't make a big deal of it. Maybe she just felt like experimenting with her wardrobe. But when she'd come out of the bedroom, she'd look incredible, more put together than usual. Sometimes it felt like she was preparing for something important, but she'd just be going to work, or out for a quick errand. There were times when I'd ask her where she was headed, and she'd just say, "Oh, nothing special," or, "Just a lunch with the girls." But something about it didn't sit right with me. She was always so effortlessly beautiful before, but now it felt like she was going out of her way to look different. Almost too polished. One night, after another late day, she came home looking exhausted, but there was something else. She seemed preoccupied, distant. When I asked her how her day went, she gave me that same short response. "It was fine. Just busy. You know how it is." But something about her tone made my stomach turn. She wasn't telling me anything. She wasn't sharing her day with me like she used to. It wasn't like her at all. She always had these small details to offer, things that she thought were funny or quirky, but now she was withholding. The conversation felt empty. I tried to push the feeling away, but it lingered. I didn't want to start a fight, so I let it go. But deep down, I knew something was off. The worst part was the way she'd act when I'd ask about her day. She'd snap at me, almost defensively, like she was irritated that I even asked. "What? Are you trying to check up on me? It's just work, Mark. You know that." I'd stand there, trying not to let it get to me, but every time she said something like that, it cut a little deeper. Was I being too demanding? Maybe. But that wasn't how we were. We always talked. We always shared. And suddenly it felt like she was pulling away from me, like I didn't deserve to know about her life anymore. The more I tried to ignore the signs, the more they built up. Her mood swings, the distance, the secrecy with her phone, the late nights. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. But what was it? Was I overreacting? Was I just imagining things? Or was I really seeing the first cracks in our marriage? I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to confront her without sounding paranoid or crazy. But deep down, I could feel it. Something was slipping away from me. And I had no idea how to stop it. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when I saw them together. I had just finished an early meeting at work and decided to swing by the grocery store to pick up a few things for dinner. I was in the mood to cook something nice for Mary, something to get us back on track. I wasn't sure what exactly was wrong, but I wanted to feel like we could still connect, even if things felt off between us. As I turned into the parking lot of our building, something made me stop. My car wasn't the only one in the lot, of course, but I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. Mary's car was parked right next to a familiar one. A car I didn't recognize at first, but when I saw it again, the black SUV with the tinted windows, I couldn't ignore the familiar sense of unease that washed over me. Miles. It was his car. The same one I had seen in the background of a few social media posts Mary had tagged him in. He was her old friend from the village, someone she kept talking about, even though I never met him. She'd always say, "Oh, he's just an old friend from back home." Or, "We're just catching up. He's in the city for work." But I didn't like the way she'd say it. The way she'd smile at the mention of his name, like there was some private joke only the two of them shared. I tried to let it go. I wasn't the jealous type. But this was different. The last few months, it felt like she was keeping something from me about him. Every time she mentioned him, she'd go quiet for a moment, and then change the subject. I had tried to tell myself it was just in my head. But now, seeing his car parked right next to hers, my stomach twisted. I parked my car and made my way up to our apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. I was trying to keep my composure, but something felt terribly off. As I rounded the corner of the building, I froze. There they were. Mary and Miles. Standing together by the entrance to the apartment complex, laughing. It wasn't just casual, friendly laughter. No, this was different. It was intimate. They were standing too close, sharing a moment that felt too private for an old friend. I could see her face light up, the kind of smile she only had for people she felt comfortable with, for people who made her feel special. I stood there, hidden behind the corner, watching them. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The way they looked at each other, it wasn't just friendship. It was too much. Too familiar. Too intimate. I had to know what was going on. I couldn't just ignore it any longer. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to walk up to them and demand an explanation, but I stayed back for a few more seconds, trying to decide. Finally, I took a deep breath and walked toward them. They didn't notice me at first, too caught up in their own conversation. But when Mary turned and saw me walking toward them, I could see her face freeze. Her eyes went wide, and her smile faltered for just a second. "And Mark?" she said, her voice too high-pitched, like she was caught off guard. I looked at them both, my heart hammering in my chest. "What's going on here?" I couldn't hide the frustration in my voice. Mary quickly stepped away from Miles, her hands nervously smoothing out her clothes. "Mark, what are you talking about?" she said, her eyes darting between me and Miles. "This is just Miles, an old friend from back home. We were talking about some old memories." I looked at Miles, who was standing there awkwardly, hands in his pockets. He was clearly uncomfortable, and I could tell he didn't know how to react. But that didn't change the fact that I had seen enough. The way they'd been standing together, so relaxed, so familiar, it wasn't just catching up. This wasn't the first time they met like this. I could feel it in my gut. I could tell Mary was trying to downplay it, but something in her eyes wasn't convincing me. There was a flicker of guilt there, something she wasn't willing to admit. "It's nothing like that, I swear," she said, her voice shaky now. "You're overreacting, Mark." "Overreacting?" I didn't say anything right away. I just stared at her. She was trying so hard to convince me. And part of me wanted to believe her. I didn't want to be the suspicious husband. I didn't want to confront her with accusations I couldn't back up. But deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore this. I had just seen the truth staring me in the face. Finally, I took a deep breath and shook my head. "I don't know, Mary. This feels like more than just catching up. You can't seriously expect me to buy that." Mary's face twisted with a hint of anger. "You're acting crazy, Mark. Miles and I are just friends. We've known each other for years. I'm not doing anything wrong." Her defensiveness hit me like a slap in the face. It was the same thing she always said when I'd ask about the weird distance between us, about the phone calls, about the late nights. It was always the same. "You're imagining things," she'd say. "You're being paranoid." But now, with Miles standing there, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was the one who was being fooled. The thing was, I wanted to believe her. I really did. So I swallowed my pride and let it go, for the moment. "I'm not imagining anything, Mary," I said quietly. "But I'll trust you. I'm just not sure what's going on anymore." Mary seemed relieved, or maybe it was more like she was frustrated with me. Either way, she turned to Miles with a forced smile. "Sorry, I'm just going to take a quick shower. I'll catch up with you later, okay?" I watched as she quickly retreated into the apartment, leaving me standing there with Miles. He looked at me for a second, a weird, almost pitying look in his eyes. But then he just nodded and said, "I should get going. See you around, man." I didn't reply. I just watched him leave, feeling like an idiot for standing there, still trying to convince myself that everything was fine. A few minutes later, Mary came back into the room, freshly showered, her demeanor completely changed. She was calm now, collected, brushing past me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was like the tension from earlier never happened. "So, Mark," she began, her voice light, as if everything was normal. "How about we have a party this weekend? We can invite some friends over, make sure everything's good between us. It'll be a chance to, reconnect. And we could even ask Miles to come, too. It'll be fun." I blinked, caught off guard. A party? I wasn't sure what to think. This wasn't the first time she had mentioned doing something to bring us closer, but now it felt different. Too rehearsed. And asking Miles to come? That made me uneasy. I stood there for a moment, trying to process her words. "A party?" I repeated, trying to make sense of it all. Mary gave me that same calm smile. "Yeah. We can invite your friends too. Maybe we just need a reminder of what's good between us. Some fun, some laughter. It'll be good for us, Mark. Don't you think?" I wasn't sure what to say. A party, sure, it sounded innocent enough. But was it just a distraction? Was she trying to cover up something? And why bring Miles into it? I didn't know what to believe anymore, but I didn't want to rock the boat just yet. "Yeah, sure," I said quietly, not fully convinced. "We can have a party." As I said the words, a sinking feeling in my stomach told me I wasn't sure if this was just a simple party, or a way for Mary to keep things under control. But either way, I had a bad feeling that the truth was closer than I wanted it to be. The party was Mary's idea. She insisted it was a chance for us to reconnect, to get back to a better place. Despite everything that had been building up in my mind, I decided to go along with it. Maybe it would help, I thought. Maybe we could finally put the tension behind us. But that's not what happened. At first, I tried to keep it together. I greeted guests, chatted with friends, and tried my best to ignore the fact that Miles kept showing up a little too often near Mary. It wasn't obvious, nothing overt, nothing that anyone else would notice, but it was there. The way they exchanged glances, the way she would laugh at something he said, like they shared a joke I wasn't a part of. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was drunk and imagining things. And I tried to let it go. I had a drink. Then another. And then another. By the time the room started spinning, I could feel the edge of everything slipping away. My mind was foggy. I was laughing, trying to engage with our friends, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I wasn't entirely sure if it was the alcohol, or if it was just the growing unease in my gut, but I was definitely losing control. Mary was by my side for a while, trying to keep me steady, but eventually, I felt myself slipping away. Maybe it was the combination of drinks and nerves, but I ended up passing out on the couch. When I woke up, it was a blur. The room was spinning in a way that made me feel sick, and my head was pounding from the alcohol. The party was still in full swing, but the joy and laughter felt distant, like it was happening in another world. I needed to get to the bathroom. I felt like I might puke if I didn't get away from the noise for a while. I pushed myself up from the couch, a little unsteady on my feet. I didn't care much for appearances at that point. I was just trying to keep it together long enough to make it to the bathroom. But as I stumbled down the hallway, something stopped me. The bathroom door was slightly open. It wasn't unusual for people to be in and out of there at a party, but something about the way the door was ajar felt wrong. I don't know what made me feel like I needed to look inside. Maybe it was the nausea that made my brain foggy, maybe it was the intuition that had been nagging at me all night. I wasn't thinking clearly, but something told me I needed to check. I pushed the door open. What I saw hit me like a punch to the gut. Mary and Miles were in there, their bodies pressed up against the wall of the small bathroom. She was facing the mirror, leaning against the sink, her back arched as he stood behind her. They weren't just talking. They weren't just hugging or joking around. They made love. I saw her face in the mirror, her eyes shut tight, her lips parted, her breath coming out in quick gasps. And Miles, his hands on her waist, pulling her closer, pushing himself against her. I could hear the sound of their breathing, the sound of skin against skin, and I froze in the doorway, unable to move, unable to say anything. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. This wasn't some innocent moment between friends. They were completely entangled in each other. Their chemistry was undeniable, like they were exactly where they were meant to be, and the realization hit me like a tidal wave. They enjoyed it. I stood there, staring at the scene, unable to process what I was seeing. The sick feeling in my stomach wasn't just from the alcohol anymore. It was pure, unadulterated pain, the kind of pain that cuts so deep, it feels like it might swallow you whole. My hands trembled, my heart felt like it was breaking in my chest, and I wanted to scream, to run out of there, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, watching them. Miles didn't even notice me at first. He was too caught up in the moment, in the heat of it all. But then, as I took an unsteady step back, I must have made a noise, because he looked up. And in that instant, everything stopped. Mary turned her head quickly, her eyes wide in panic. She pushed him away from her, her face flushed with embarrassment and guilt, but it was too late. I had seen enough. "What the hell, Mark?" she gasped, as if the shock of being caught hadn't already hit her. She quickly tried to adjust herself, but there was no hiding the truth now. I couldn't speak at first. My mind was spinning. My stomach churned, and I felt a wave of nausea hit me again, but this time it wasn't just the alcohol, it was everything crashing down at once. I had known something was wrong, but seeing it in front of me, seeing them together, it was like the ground had been pulled out from under me. You! I managed to choke out, but my voice was thick, strangled. You've been lying to me. All this time. Miles just stood there, not even trying to hide his discomfort. He shuffled a bit, avoiding my gaze like a coward. But Mary? She didn't know what to say. She tried to gather herself, her hands shaking, but there was no excuse, no reason she could give that would make this okay. Mark, Mary stammered, her voice shaky, her eyes filled with panic. She pushed away from Miles and quickly tried to fix her clothes. Mark, please. It's not what it looks like. I can explain. Explain? How could she possibly explain this? My vision blurred with the heat of anger and hurt, but I couldn't even find the words at first. I was frozen in place, feeling sick to my stomach. You! I finally found my voice, but it was barely more than a growl. You were having sex with him? Right here? In our bathroom? In my house? I couldn't stop the words from coming out. I couldn't stop myself from feeling the rage build up in my chest. I was shaking, my fists clenched at my sides, and my head felt like it might explode from the pressure. Miles, still standing there, finally spoke up, but his words made everything worse. Mark, look, we didn't. I cut him off. Don't talk to me. Don't even open your mouth. This isn't your mess to clean up. My voice was rising, raw with emotion. You think I didn't know something was wrong? You think I didn't feel it? But this is something else entirely. Mary tried to step toward me, her hands raised in a pleading gesture, but I took a step back, backing away from her like I didn't even recognize her anymore. Mark, listen, she said, her voice trembling. This isn't how I wanted things to happen. I wasn't planning for any of this, it just happened. I didn't mean for it to get to this point. Didn't mean for it to get to this point? I spat. What point, Mary? What the hell were you thinking? This is beyond anything I could have imagined. I thought we were trying to fix things. I thought we were working on our marriage. She looked away, almost ashamed to meet my gaze. But then, in the same breath, she was defensive again, her voice rising in frustration. You weren't there for me, Mark. You didn't see it. You didn't listen to me. You were always too busy with work, too busy with everything else but me. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed something more. I needed someone who would be there. Her words cut deep. I'd felt the distance between us, but hearing it like this, hearing her actually say that she had been driven to another man, another person, because I wasn't enough? It was like a slap to the face. Someone who would be there? I repeated, my voice thick with disbelief. You mean someone who would fuck you in our bathroom? Is that what you needed, Mary? Miles shifted uncomfortably behind her, his eyes darting to the floor, but he didn't dare step forward again. I couldn't even look at him anymore. I just wanted him out of my sight. I turned back to Mary, and everything inside me seemed to snap. You think you can just justify this? You think you can tell me I wasn't there for you, so you had to sleep with him? What, you thought I wouldn't find out? You thought I was too stupid to notice? I wasn't thinking, she said quickly, stepping toward me again, but this time I didn't back away. I don't know. Everything was falling apart, and I didn't know who else to turn to. I didn't know how to fix it, Mark. You turned to him. I yelled, cutting her off. You didn't even try to talk to me. You didn't try to fix it with me. You went behind my back, and now you want to stand here and act like you didn't betray me? She froze for a second, but then her expression hardened. She wasn't pleading anymore. She wasn't sorry. Instead, she just glared at me, like I was the one who had done something wrong. Well, maybe I didn't think you deserved me anymore, she snapped back, her voice rising in anger. Maybe I was tired of being ignored. Maybe I needed someone who could actually make me feel something for once. I staggered back, the words hitting me like a punch to the gut. My entire body went cold, and the room felt like it was spinning again. This wasn't just about the affair anymore. This was about everything we hadn't talked about, everything we hadn't fixed, every piece of the puzzle I had been too blind to see. "You didn't think I deserved you?" I echoed, almost choking on the words. "Are you kidding me? After everything? After all we've been through?" Mary didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her face said it all. There was no apology left, no remorse. She had made her choice, and in that moment, I realized there was nothing I could say or do to fix it. I wasn't enough for her anymore, and it didn't matter how hard I tried to hold on. She had already let go. "Get out," I said, my voice barely a whisper, my chest tightening with every word. "Both of you. Just get the hell out." I turned away from them, the words burning in my throat, my eyes blurry with the pain. I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't look at either of them. I didn't care what excuses they had. I didn't care how she tried to justify it. I just wanted them gone. I heard footsteps behind me as Mary and Miles left the bathroom, but I didn't turn around. I didn't need to see them leave. I already knew this was over. I couldn't sleep that night. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing the look on Mary's face, her words echoing in my mind. "Maybe I didn't think you deserved me anymore." Those words haunted me more than anything else. I had spent years building my life around her, and she was telling me, in the coldest way possible, that it wasn't enough. The pain wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that I had been blind to everything she was feeling. All those late nights at the office, all those times I thought I was doing the right thing by providing for us, by trying to make our life together as perfect as I could. But all she wanted was someone who'd be there, who'd listen, who'd make her feel wanted. I had failed her in ways I never understood until that moment. The next few days felt like a blur. I didn't even know what to do with myself. Mary moved in with Miles. They left without much of a fight, without much fanfare, just an empty house and a cold, hollow feeling in my chest. I couldn't bring myself to call her, to beg her to come back. I knew it was pointless. She had made her choice, and I wasn't part of it anymore. But the hardest part wasn't her leaving. It wasn't seeing her with Miles. It was that I didn't know who I was anymore without her. I'd built my entire world around our life together. Now, it felt like I had nothing. I started to avoid our old friends. I couldn't bear to see them with their families, all the happy couples who seemed so perfect while I was falling apart. I spent most of my time in my office, going through the motions of work, pretending like everything was okay. But it wasn't. I was broken. A few weeks passed. I tried to tell myself that I needed to move on, that I needed to get over her. But every time I saw her name pop up on my phone or heard about her from mutual friends, I felt a pit in my stomach. The anger came in waves, followed by deep sadness, and it never seemed to end. I couldn't just turn it off. I talked to a therapist. I didn't think it would help, but after a few sessions, I realized something. It wasn't about getting her back. It wasn't about fixing our marriage. It was about me. I had lost myself in trying to be the perfect husband, the perfect provider, and in the process, I had forgotten who I was. I had forgotten what made me happy, what made me tick outside of her and our relationship. I still remember the day I finally made a decision. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the empty spot where her things used to be. I realized that I didn't need her to be happy. I had everything I needed inside me, but I'd been too focused on her to see it. I couldn't keep waiting for an apology that wasn't coming. I couldn't keep hoping for a reconciliation that would never happen. So, I did what I needed to do for myself. I booked a flight. I sold the house. I needed a fresh start, away from everything that reminded me of her. I moved to a different country. Somewhere far away from the life I had known, from the memories of Mary and Miles. At first, it was difficult. The loneliness hit hard, especially in the quiet moments. But as time went on, I began to rebuild my life. I started meeting new people, finding joy in small things again. I took up hobbies I'd forgotten about and started focusing on the future, not the past. It wasn't easy. It wasn't a quick fix. But with every day that passed, the pain of betrayal started to fade, replaced by a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I learned to forgive myself, to let go of the guilt that had weighed me down for so long. I had given everything to her, and I had done nothing wrong. She had made her choices, and now, it was time for me to make mine. I still think about Mary sometimes. Not with anger, but with a sense of finality. I can look back now and see how much I've grown. I'm not the same person I was when I first found out. That version of me, the one who was blind to everything and just wanted to make his wife happy, is gone. And in his place is someone stronger, someone who knows his worth, someone who will never settle for less than what he deserves. To anyone out there going through something like this, my advice is simple: don't lose yourself in someone else. Yes, love is important, but so are you. Take the time to figure out who you are, what makes you happy, and don't ever settle for someone who doesn't appreciate you for everything you are. You deserve better. I'm not sure what the future holds. Maybe I'll meet someone new, maybe I'll stay single for a while. But for the first time in a long time, I'm okay with not knowing. I'm okay with where I'm at. I'm finally in control of my own life again, and that's something no one can ever take away from me.